Hey nerds, we are talking about Star Trek Strange New Worlds, Episode 8, The Elysian Kingdom. We are going to give our reviews of the episode and then get into a spoiler breakdown of the episode, starting now. Welcome to the Nerd Social. I'm Nathan.
I'm Swetha.
Hey, so if you want to just jump to our breakdown, the chapter information is either down there or over there. I guess our reviews have some light spoilers. If you haven't seen the trailer, there's a trailer link above my head. All right, so the U.S.S. Enterprise becomes stuck in a nebula that is home to an alien consciousness that traps the crew in a fairy tale. That is the spoiler-free logline provided to us from Paramount. So, Swetha, what did you think of this episode?
Oh man, it just stomped all over my heart, truly. And also greatly appreciative of the creativity of managing the complex storyline between father and daughter and terminal illnesses. Yeah, I thought, and it really harkened back to a lot of different previous episodes for me and other series with what telepathy looks like and how telepathy plays out on the ship, which I always think is interesting. But yeah, it was an emotional one for me. Didn't expect it. Didn't see it coming.
Contra, what'd you think?
Yeah, I think for me it was, I guess, like the campiness of original Trek without a lot of the issues, the problematic nature it can have sometimes. So it was in that regard. I enjoyed seeing the characters in different roles, in different lights, because you see this episode is happening through a child's mind, in a sense. And I thought it was unexpected what they chose to do with Dr. Mbenga's daughter's character. I wasn't sure like where that was going based on what happened in the last episode. Because of course he's still struggling to cure her. But I liked where they took that and how that story was rounded out, at least for this season. Hopefully we see it continue, but no, it was a bit of an emotional roller coaster.
Yeah, and this is mostly a episode that focuses on Mbenga and his daughter Rakia and her issues, but it's like a classic Trek holodeck episode as well without the holodeck. So I was looking through the episodes that are like this, the Killing Game from Voyager, part 1 and 2, when they were trapped in the holodeck, the whole Rogans trapped them in the holodeck and wiped their mind. Our Man Bashir was another episode like this where the transporter transported a bunch of the crew to the holodeck and they were just acting like other characters within the spy novel. Fistful of Data was really just Data wiped, but it was a very similar one as well. Bada Bing, Bada Bang from DS9 as well. Bride of Coatica, which is a Voyager episode. And Frame of Mind, it's not really a holodeck episode, but it was like an episode similar to this where Riker loses his mind, or he thinks that he's losing his mind. He's in a asylum. But it's like a holodeck episode, but it's also like an alien take over the ship episode as well. And we've had a couple of those. We've had the TNG episode Mask, the Conundrum from season 5, and also Clues from season 4. So there's a lot of things like this in Trek canon, which you would expect, because we're like at episode like 870 something of Trek episodes. So they're playing with tropes, but they, just like every other episode in this season, when they're playing with tropes and also doing something else and in this episode they're playing with the holodeck trope and also dealing with the Mbenga storyline and his daughter at the same time, which I really appreciate. Yeah, just like you said, Swetha, it definitely hit me this episode emotionally, and especially what they did at the end of the episode. I didn't expect them to wrap up that storyline like that either. Chandra, I was of two minds about it, but I think I ultimately like where they ended up, and we can talk about that when we get into the breakdown. Yeah, I like where they ended up, but I had to think about it for a day or so before I accepted what they did. This episode is written by Akela Cooper and Onitra Johnson. So Akela also wrote the Ghost of Illyria episode earlier in the season, which is one of my favorite episodes of the season as well. So yeah, this was definitely a high watermark for me. I'd probably give this like an 8.5 if it was rating it. It's a really good episode. All right, so you guys want to get into the breakdown, or you have anything else you want to say spoiler-free about the episode?
Yeah. Contra reminded me of how much I enjoyed Pike's portrayal throughout the episode, which I will love to get into.
Yeah. So the reason that I listed, so there are, of course, a lot more holodeck episodes than the ones that I listed, but the ones that I listed, at least the first couple ones, like the Killing Game and things like that, those are ones where the crew or the cast of the show get to play completely against type or a completely different character. In this case, a lot of the crew gets to play a different character. That's not really a spoiler. Like I said, that's in the log line here, that the crew is trapped in a fairy tale. So yeah, you get a lot of the crew, except for in Binga, because there's always someone who's not trapped. Like in our man Bashir, it was Bashir who understood the risk to the crew, and he was trying to keep everyone alive, even the people that were trying to kill him. And Binga is cast in the same situation. He's trying to get everyone out of this situation. Yeah, but everyone is having fun. And I think you get to see all these actors range. I think I liked what everyone was doing with their new assignments, except for Ortegas, but I started to like what she was doing like later on in the episode. And we can talk about that a little bit as well when we get into it. Yeah. Anything else? Okay. I guess we can jump into spoiler talk. So I should say, before we get into spoilers, if you're enjoying the conversation, we really appreciate it if you comment down below to join the conversation, like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out, helps us grow, helps us give you more content like this. We really appreciate it. We're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers by the end of the summer. Thank you. And spoilers ahead. Go watch the episode. What do you guys want to talk about?
Do we just want to? All of it revolves around Mbenga and
right,
which we don't know.
Yeah, she shows up very early on in the episode, and just like every other episode, you get the knowledge that this episode is going to be focused on a particular character, and you get his log as the chief medical officer. He mentions that they're scanning this nebula, and that he doesn't really have anything to do, so he's still doing research on Rakia's ailment. And then on the bridge, Spock and Pike are talking about jinxing things, because Pike says something to the effect that he's glad that things are calm. And Spock says something about, don't humans have superstitions about things like this? And then, of course, things happen.
Perhaps you did indeed jinx it.
I feel like that is always a classic scene, though, where they have, oh, things are calm, this is beautiful, and then they try to leave, and then they can't. You're like, oh, okay, where's
it does happen. It happens quite a bit. Like, just the episodes that I list probably we're not expansive. There are a lot of episodes that are like this episode that they're drawing from, which I appreciate. So yeah, and then he goes, I think when they try to leave the nebula is when they can't leave it, and the ship is jostled, and it knocks it out of, and that's when Mbenga is called to the bridge. Before that, he has a conversation with Una about clearing people for duty, and he's so wrapped up in his work that he misses that, and she tells him to go and rest. So he's, of course, trying to work very diligently. We don't get a sense of how much time Rakia has, but it seems like every time he takes her out, it's like cutting down that time. And then we get to the bridge, and then everything has changed. So yeah,
I think it's hinted that it's like down to possibly even hours. But yeah, the exact time isn't noted. It's also, I would say, it's a quick amount of information to absorb as a viewer, because the last news we were given was not bad news. It was like a gift from an alien race that like hopefully going to help him find a cure. And it's like processing where he's at very quickly and understanding that things are not like, even despite the help, like he can't make forward progress
which was kind of weird. Like you said, like just last week, I think he got that, or maybe, sorry, it was 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, he got the help from I even forget the people. I know that the guy went to Prospect 7, but I forget where the people's names. But so you would think that he would be making some sort of progress, but apparently he's not. And he's hitting his head against the wall. So I didn't think they were going to resolve, I didn't know if they were going to resolve the issue with his daughter this season at all. I was surprised that they resolved it this quickly. I thought maybe it was something that was going to be resolved after they were going to resolve it at the end of the season. But I guess this is episode 8. We're very near the end of the season. There was only 2 episodes left. But yeah, what did you think about the resolve at the end? Basically being absorbed into the nebula by the entity.
It tickles, Daddy.
I was surprised. I did like that he made it her choice, because it was very much, obviously you could see him struggling with what it might mean once like he came to the realization that it wasn't a permanent fix, because the entity was able to heal her, but for whatever reason, that healthy state was only good for if she stayed there. And so I'm struggling with that, but ultimately giving her the choice, but also letting her know that he would be okay with whatever she chose. So truly like giving her that freedom was, I think, important, right? Like not pressuring her. But like you, I think I was surprised that's how they chose to resolve it. It was a very painless resolution, especially because they also surprise you again because she reappears like 5 seconds after she gets it as an adult. So yeah, so it kind of like rips you apart, and then you're like, oh wait, she's an adult, she's okay. Which I think is important for him. She then gives him permission to live his life. I am okay. You made the right decision. Because now, obviously, I guess she can, maybe when he does find a cure, if she chooses to have a human body, she can live a human life if she wants to. But she's also been free to live this fantasy wherever, right? Yeah, this consciousness. And so, yeah, it felt, I don't know, it left me sort of feeling very very calm. As a kid, if you have a very vivid imagination, that's like the ultimate dream. Like you just get to live out your fantasy
Well, she has
all day, every
yeah.
day for years. No consequences, no suffering. Yeah. So it was surprising, but it wasn't a terrible
I would
surprise.
say without her coming back as an adult, I was dubious about the decision because sure, he gives her the choice, but she's also like 10. And without her coming back as an adult saying you made the right choice.
I'm happy. I'm safe. You did the right thing.
And I'm okay, and I've lived an entire lifetime, and I could live 1,000 more lifetimes. It's difficult, like, to say that's the right decision. I understand that she was going to die, and I understand the way they presented it in this episode. He didn't look like he was making any progress. Although it's weird that they had him make progress 2 weeks ago and then say that he's not making any progress. So yes, from the perspective of he's not going to make any progress, this entity can save her. It makes some sort of sense, but without her coming back, I was a little uncomfortable with him putting it on her to decide until she came back and said it was the right thing to do. That was also a very emotional scene as well. It's an adult, her coming back.
Yeah, I would say that the decision to have her come back, though, was probably the most controversial one, because I think there are two types of these kinds of episodes, right? One is wrap it up in a neat bow. Whether or not this is neat, we could debate. There's like the idea of like actually understanding what the like conclusion of the story is. And then the second is seeing what you do with the characters later on. What are the second order effects of the decisions that characters have made? And yeah, I am of two minds about it, because on the one hand, like without that resolution, it would have eaten at me to try and figure out what would have happened to her so young and by herself.
And an entity, yeah. The entity is the only like companionship. Yeah, she's a 10-year-old. Yeah,
it's very intense. And on the other hand, I feel like this sort of storyline comes up a couple of different times, right? Where various characters are given the opportunity to leave for their betterment, whether that's physical, emotional, in some cases intellectual or telepathic. Like there are a number of reasons for that given in the universe. And I think it's pretty rare that the first opportunity that comes along is the one that is taken. And I think that sets this scene more apart in my eyes, because I feel like usually characters have this choice 2 or 3 times before a decision is made.
So the only thing that's really coming to mind right now, and I'm just not thinking of it, are the ones Cass leaving Voyager, and we didn't really know what was going to happen with her until she came back and started wrecking things. It's a couple seasons later.
Yeah, the second character was 7 of 9 in the same series, was given the opportunity a few different times, including one in which she did try to leave in the think tank and then came back because it turns out the whole thing was a hoax. But yeah, those are the 2 that come to mind directly. Unsurprisingly, Voyager is something that I binge more than probably I should, and so those are the 2 that are like fresh in my memory.
Yeah,
right?
I don't know. Like there was already some chatter on the internet about like him not necessarily being a great father or a great chief. So there was a couple things I've heard within conversations, people saying, "Oh, this is how he lost being chief medical officer," because Bones is chief medical officer in the TOS era, and he shows up in 2 episodes and he's assisting Bones, so he's not chief medical officer. So the presumption was that him doing this was against some sort of regulation. I'm not sure what regulation it would be because he's the one who figured this out. But he did put the ship in jeopardy during the episode with the Ghost of Valerian. If that isn't the case, I'm not sure how he's going to get demoted later on if his daughter isn't inside of the buffer anymore. But like without the resolution at the end, regardless of whether or not that makes him a good medical officer or not, I don't think it would have made me think that he's a good father. Regardless of the fact that he was trying to save her, like sending her into that unknown without buttoning it up at the end where he knows that it was the right choice. And I'm sure they could have gotten stuff out of that, like it would eat at him and maybe we would visit the nebula at some point, but I guess they decided to close the loop. And we might go back to the nebula at some point, but I don't think we will for a while if we go back.
I mean, I think so. Even though he got that help from the alien, right, it was still very theoretical. Even the alien, like, I think this could work. And then he's also working alone. He's working in isolation, which is never the best thing, right? If you have just one set of eyes and one brain working on a problem, you're not gonna, even with an idea here or there, you're probably not gonna solve the problem as quickly as possible. And the fact that there is no ready cure out there for her says that this is still an issue in their time. So I guess it's not super surprising that even though he made some progress, it wasn't enough against the timeline for the progression of her disease. So I guess that sort of like doesn't seem unrealistic. And he also probably has a better sense of what he, like time is running out. He knows if he can't find a cure, she will die. Like that is no thing. And then he's presented with this entity that hasn't harmed her, that has in fact created a world for her, because she's also been living in the pattern buffer for
months
now. And so she's been living in isolation for a long time.
She doesn't necessarily see that, perceive that time though. Like she doesn't, but she all, I think she doesn't, not in a sense, but she's like, she complains that you've read this story to hundreds of times. So I think that monotony is also, I'm not a parent, but I would imagine like you want better for your child. And so there are limited options. And even though it's an unknown, what information he has is that this entity cured her. It hasn't harmed her. And if anything, is catering to her whims and fancies. And even though she's a 10-year-old, when the alternative is almost certain death, it's not a great decision or choices to have. But I think a lot of people, you want to be hopeful. Yeah. I think, like I said, I think the way that they wrote it, I'm okay with the decision. If they had written it a little more open-endedly, I would have felt a lot more anxiety at the end of this episode than I did with the way that they wrapped it up. It might be too neat for some people, but I don't need that hanging out. I already know Pike is going to die in 10 years. I don't need another thing to worry about. So
it's also very different when you're talking about children, right? It's one thing for her if she was like an adult making that choice and she was terminally ill. Like you can deal with the open-ended of that choice a little bit better than like a girl who is still so tiny and young.
Exactly. All right, so we talked about the main point of the episode. Now we can talk about the fun, campy parts of this episode. The cast getting to play way against type sometimes, like with Pike playing a sniveling like coward, which he did very well.
Thank you, Sire.
Really?
Saroth isn't exactly known for his bravery.
Mount did that very well. It seems like he was having fun. Everyone seemed to like they were having fun in this episode.
Yeah, it gave them very much Midsummer Night Dream vibes for me, which I really enjoyed. I mean, all the way through the costuming too, which was, as usual, delightful. And I appreciate all the attention to detail that they did.
I think my favorite was La'an. Silly and just so frivolous, was really entertaining.
What did Nurse Chapel turn into? Like, I mean, she seemed taller than usual. They had her in some sort of boots or something, like, but I can't remember what her position was.
She was still like a healer of sorts, was the impression I got.
Yeah, like she was doing some variety of like weird telepathy / type.
Maybe a apothecary or something like that. Yeah, okay, fair enough. And they had Spock as like a wizard, and his brother was Hammer, who was the only other person who understood what was going on. So I guess the Andorian or the Enar telepathic powers are stronger than the Vulcan telepathic powers, because
I was surprised about that. Spock was also like caught up.
I mean, this also might just be commentary on the fact that he's younger. Maybe an older Spock would have been able to push that out. He hasn't gone through we were talking about last week with Captain Angel Kolinar, right? So maybe he doesn't have the same mental control that he does when he's older. And the Enar are born with the telepathic powers that they have. So that's why Hammer was able to push the entity out of his head. I'm not sure if he was able to do that, why entity was able to wipe his mind at the end, because no one remembers except for him. Mbinga.
None of the crew remember what happened. The entity's doing, my daughter's doing, I'm sure.
So, yeah. And maybe it was him being a conduit to the entity at the end, like let the entity speak through him. Maybe that was when his mind was erased. Yeah. But he was funny on this. Even though he wasn't wiped out, the way he was just reacting to everyone, and like when he was being dragged to the hallway, it's like, I'm gonna have you court martial, I'm your superior officer. He's like, and he also, even though his mind was in a race, tried to also lean into the fantasy a little bit with the magic of science lines and stuff like that. Yeah. Who else? Like I said, I didn't like the way that Ortegas was playing her character at the very beginning.
It is my sworn duty to tend to the king's well-being. He shall drink nothing I have not tasted.
But they gave her a really cool action scene in the middle of this episode.
I have armed myself.
where she takes out a few people. And then I think right after that, the way that she was playing the character, I warmed to the way she was playing the character. But I think at the beginning, some of the choices that she was making, Melissa Navia was making, didn't really sit well. It seemed a little bit weird to me, but it got better later on in the episode for me.
I felt like her character was the least different because Helmsman is very like confrontational or brash, but it was nice to see her being the most courageous, right? Because you're used to that coming from Captain Pike, and in this situation was completely useless, and she just takes over. So she seemed to me, she seemed.
I will say that part of my impression of her performance might be the fact that they haven't given us an Ortegas episode, and all the highlights that we've had of her throughout the season have been her being cool and her adding to the mix, but we haven't had an episode from her point of view, so we don't really have a full sense of who she is, except for when she says a smart comment here or there when she's talking to Pike, or when she hazed Uhura in episode, I think, 2 of the season. So it's harder to get a bead on if there is much of a modulation beyond sassiness from the Helms seat character that she usually plays. Yeah. So who else? Oh yeah, Una shows up as basically a huntsman from the woods who has a relationship with the Ortegas character.
Know each other very well.
Yeah, and that was Kia's retcon of the book, the way that she wanted things to be. Celia Rose Gooding plays the evil queen.
Welcome to my kingdom. Now, kneel before me.
And she was also loving it and also hamming it up in that role, which is awesome to see. Let's see, am I missing anyone? We got Ensign Mount, we got Spock, we got Jess Bush, Christina Chong. I think that was everyone from the main cast. Yeah. And then of course there were just generally just people from the crew who were dressed in red as red shirts, but like different kinds of red shirts, like medieval red shirts, just doing the bidding of the evil queen. But yeah, I think everyone obviously had a good time in this episode, and I think as compared to last week where it seemed like everyone had a good time on the pirate ship, but I didn't like the episode that much because everyone was kind of shunted off to the pirate ship. Everyone's having a good time on this episode, and I think as an audience member, I was on the ride with them, and it was a very fun episode. Yeah.
Yeah, a big part of the fun for me in this episode is watching who is the person that we're meant to follow throughout the episode to see like why something is happening. And there's always that moment of anticipation of is like how bad is it, the situation that they're in. And I thought like that part was done extremely well. And it's always so funny to me, the nonchalance with which the entire crew just appears to be like, oh yeah, I guess we don't remember those 5 hours.
That's spacefaring. Yeah. That's it. Strange New World. That's what things happen in space.
Yeah. You're like, all right, this is another day. It's another Tuesday where we don't remember half the day.
Yeah, whatever happened, we're all alive.
Oh, I was totally convinced during that sword fight scene that either Ortegas was going to die or she was going to take someone else out and that it would be permanent. Like, I really stressed.
And then Una shows up and starts shooting people with arrows. It's like none of those wounds were like life-threatening either. Yeah. I guess she shot him at the shoulder or something. I don't know. But she shot some people. She definitely shot some people.
It did not look pleasant. It still looked like it might hurt you.
Yes. I think Hemmer and Binga's concern about people getting hurt was probably well founded because I think that's right after Una starts shooting people. That's when they had the conversation about we have to figure this out because before someone gets hurt. So yeah.
And Benga was also, I think throughout this series in general, like, he is just very surprisingly calm and cool. And so when he does get really upset, it's always, this must be really serious. Because I feel like he's that person you measure yourself against, like, how serious is this threat? Do I need to how concerned should I be? And if he is freaked out, then I should also be freaked out. So he was very, let's figure out this problem. Very methodical, very calm, take some risks, expect to get double crossed, but then that'll also help us figure it out. So it was, I enjoy watching.
Babs, I'm not even the character. His last name. I'm gonna butcher it. But yeah, the actor Babs, he does a good job with him. The way that he plays him is definitely even keel, I guess Obama-esque, kind of non-flappable under pressure. So yeah, if he's upset, and he definitely saw him very concerned, but he tried to work it out methodically. And he worked with the fantasy, and he was glad to find a compatriot in Hemmer to try to figure it out together. Yeah, and of course, in the middle of this episode, they have some nonsensical or like scientific explanation. Spontaneous consciousness was created in the nebula. That
I always love it. There's always like some reference in some textbooks, like, oh, you didn't learn about this at the academy. Like this is this thing. It's like a footnote in some strange lecture.
Okay.
And it always has a name. Like there's like
Yeah.
it's a whole thing.
Yeah.
I feel like there's more than enough just evidence in the Star Trek universe that Nebula can sometimes house
Like entities, consciousness. Yeah, didn't necessarily need that, but they had it. Yeah.
Yeah, as always.
Maybe they should come with a warning when you go into a nebula. Like, these are all the possibilities.
Yeah. All right. Did we miss anything? I'm trying to think if there are any important, the really important stuff we talked about first, which is the storyline and all the fun stuff, which basically getting to that at the end. The craziness was getting to that at the end. But yeah, I think we covered everything. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much everything.
All right, I think that is what we think, but we want to hear what you guys think. Are we off about this episode? Let us know. Comment down below. Like and subscribe. I really appreciate it. All right. Peace. Thanks. Bye, guys.
Right.